Hi there guys, welcome back to the Tower Tech, Michael C here. Apologies, we've had a couple of kind of floaty head type videos. I have got some new tech coming in the next couple of weeks, so I'll be doing good reviews of that. Indeed, the first item is arriving tomorrow, and slight spoiler, it has to do with my audio setup, so make sure you're subscribed and stay tuned for that. The video that I'm going to do today is a video I debated about whether or not to actually do, and it's related to my Ryzen CPU overview video, which seemed to divide the community quite severely. At the time of making this video, I've got 52 likes, which is pretty good going for one of my videos at 350 subscribers. A big thank you to all of you, by the way. But I've also got 60 dislikes, so that actually is my most viewed video in the first 48 hours of release. It's my most liked video in the first 48 hours of release. Indeed, one of my most liked videos, period. And absolutely my most disliked video by quite a long stretch. So I want to talk in this vlog a little bit about the fact that my message didn't quite land and what it was that I actually meant by that video, and reflect a little bit on the processor CPU market without being quite so specific as I was in that previous video, and also to talk about the way in which I personally viewed some of the comments and some of the feedback that I got from that video. So that gives you a good summary of what to expect in this video. So this will probably be the last floaty head video for a while. Lots of good tech coming, as I say, so make sure you're subscribed by bashing the button down there. But let's get into this vlog. And the first thing that I want to say, and I did touch on this in the Ryzen video that I did a little bit, was I am by no means an Intel fanboy, and I was categorically accused of being an Intel fanboy in those videos. And indeed, around about the time that I got really heavily into creating custom builds, AMD were absolutely dominant. The Athlon XP, the Athlon 64 and the Athlon 64X2, all of which were fantastic CPUs that I owned, were the first processors that I put into my own custom builds. So I certainly did not grow up suckling the teat of Intel. I grew up and really established myself in the PC industry using AMD CPUs. So all accusations of Intel fanboyism, false and incorrect. And the intent of my video was not to provoke fanboys actually of either camp. The intent of the video actually was completely the opposite of that. The point that I was trying to convey is that competition in any market is very, very healthy and very, very necessary, and the consumer, the end consumer, remember guys, I am an end consumer, ultimately benefit from better competition, sharper pricing, and in my opinion as an enthusiast, someone who's always looking for the absolute maximum performance, is continued development, faster rates of improvement and better end products for the enthusiast, for the consumer to use. Competition is a good thing, and companies really should earn our money. Now, whether that's a $350 CPU, whether that's a $1,000 CPU, this is an awful lot of money. Actually at both ends of the spectrum, and those companies really should earn your money. And the other point I was trying to convey in that video was, don't take AMD's word for it. Now, whether you're an Intel enthusiast, an AMD enthusiast, or indeed like myself, you sit on the fence, they need to earn your money, and they earn that money through independent testing, not their own selective set of benchmarks. And that comment seemed to provoke quite the response. And again, at the risk of provoking some AMD type backlash, there is a legitimate argument that says that AMD have some responsibility to bear in the arguably unreasonable pricing of some of the Intel X99 enthusiast lineup CPU pricing, right? So, you know, is $1,000 reasonable for a CPU? That may or may not be reasonable. Is $1,700 reasonable for a consumer level CPU? Probably go so far as to say on that one, probably not. But the lack of competition in the market has allowed AMD to set their pricing in that way, and people have been willing to pay it. So, you know, the absolutely fantastic outcome of the Ryzen CPU lineup is what I hope will be much, much better pricing. The point I was trying to convey, which certainly seems to have been perceived by some people as an Intel fanboy type approach, was that I wanted Intel to come out swinging. And really what I meant by that was I want AMD to produce a good chip, then I want Intel to produce a good chip, then I want AMD to produce a good chip, then I want Intel to produce a good chip. And what I'm hoping is that we don't have this random blip in time that AMD have got a competitive product, and that we just then go back to another decade or so of Intel supreme dominance over the market. I hope that we start to get into the cyclical nature that's always keeping both companies on their toes. And we should remember this as the end consumer, right? These companies are multi-billion pound corporations. We shouldn't be fanboys of one or the other. We should expect and demand the absolute best pricing, the absolute best performance, and the absolute best competition from both of these organizations. We should be independent. And that kind of was what I was trying to convey in my CPU. Now I accept in my video. Now I accept that I may have got the tone of that video a little bit wrong. I think some of the comments that I received on the back of that video were quite a bit substantially more wrong. Now my kids, my 10-year-old in particular, looks at my channel and reads some of the comments. So please, guys, a bit of a plea. Let's try and keep it clean. I had to delete quite a number of those comments, which felt like a slightly extreme to, you know, what would be perceived by people with real problems to be a relatively trivial problem. So, you know, does it particularly matter whether I have a preference for Intel or AMD? It really doesn't, by the way, guys. So I think the other point I want to convey, which I think in part is what inspired the video that I released, but I absolutely did not convey this in the video, is a very, very clever chap by the name of Moore, who was an Intel employee, I will hold my hand, well, indeed an Intel founder, I will hold my hand up to, came out with a very important law in computing. And that law said that the number of transistors on a like-sized silicon die will double every 18 months. That actually is quite an important forecast. That gives a forecast materially to the level of compute performance improvement that you're going to see on a year-by-year basis. And that law has held very, very, very true right up until present day. That law is becoming increasingly difficult to adhere to. And the reason that law is becoming increasingly difficult to adhere to is because of the properties of silicon itself. As the gaps between the transistors become smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, the relative performance, the risk of effectively leakage of particular states of the transistor between each of them becomes increasingly more likely. So moving from 14 nanometers to 10 nanometers is more of a challenge than the generation that came before it, to such an extent that Intel has actually revised its whole model around how it manufactures and revises different iterations of its CPUs. So Intel has operated a principle that it calls tick-tock, and the tick represents a new fabrication process for the silicon that it's producing. That's the nanometers that exist between the transistors, the spacing or the shrinking of the die, if you like, and the TOC is the refinement of the architecture. So its typical cycle would be a tick, shrink, add more transistors to a per inch squared of silicon, and then the TOC would be the refinement to the architecture. So Intel actually scrapped all of that, and it's actually replaced it with a far less eloquently named process architecture optimization cycle, nowhere near as compelling, by the way, Intel, as tick-tock, which has effectively added more time in to the refinement and the shrinking of the architecture that it's using. So that puts Moore's law under threat. And part of what I was trying to convey in my AMD Ryzen video was that, okay, fine, AMD have caught up. That actually is a really, really good thing. And AMD actually have come in much more aggressively priced. But are we throwing fundamental laws into question now that, instructions per clock cycle, we were effectively comparing a 18-month-old architecture to a present-day architecture, and that seemed to suggest to me that we've become more accepting of poorer leaps forward in technological capability than perhaps we would have been 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And it had absolutely nothing to do with whether you like AMD, had absolutely nothing to do with whether you like Intel, and had everything to do with the fact that technological advancement seems to be slowing, prices seem to be rising, and should we as the consumer be accepting of that? Healthy competition in the market prevents that kind of complacency by any one manufacturer from happening. So I try to deliver an impartial, balanced outlook on the Ryzen architecture versus X99 platform, 6900D, and indeed it was Intel that started those direct sort of comparisons. Certainly some of the people that view my channel got that and had made comments to that effect. It would certainly seem like there were an awful lot of people that had either I'd mislanded the message or they'd taken the message very much out of context. So all I would say is, guys, people, YouTubers, work very hard on these videos. For what you view for 5 or 10 minutes probably was somewhere in the order of 4 or 5 hours worth of work, and I've got absolutely no issue with constructive comments, but just complete abuse is not particularly helpful, and I'd encourage you to be a little bit more reflective on the video. And guys, please watch the whole video. YouTubers can pull off analytics and they can see how far into a video someone has got before they've tuned out or before they've left a comment, etc. And it's fair to say that on that particular video, people didn't get much past the opening. Argument to say I didn't get the opening right, accepted, hold my hands up to that. But guys, try to watch the whole video before you cast too much disparaging judgment. I think I'll close this video again at the risk of angering the AMD community on. The Chief Technology Officer of AMD has gone on record to say that the Ryzen architecture is here for 4 years, which feels like an awfully long period of time if I'm honest. Now, whether that would be an Intel architecture around for 4 years or an AMD architecture around for 4 years, that's a long period of time. Doesn't feel right. X299, the new Intel Enthusiast platform, is set for a Q3 launch in 2017, so somewhere around September or October, so that will be interesting to see what it brings. Interesting to see what it brings, not that I'm necessarily going to invest in it. And I think I'll probably close this video on the fact that I'm almost certainly going to invest in the Ryzen architecture. So as a content creator, I've got a single dependency on one PC at the moment. If that PC was to fail, if that PC was to break, I actually would not be able to produce edit and upload content, which would be pretty frustrating for me, and I'm sure pretty frustrating for you guys. So by way of a backup content editing and creation PC build, Ryzen absolutely constitutes the best value for money, the right architecture for me to invest in. Its performance is absolutely phenomenal in content creation, whether that be video editing, photo editing, sound editing. Absolutely stonking performance. By all accounts, from the reviews that I've seen, not so great in game performance, but again, with a caveat against that the board manufacturers for the motherboards really did not get a very long lead time to produce the BIOS and the ecosystem that sits around the Ryzen CPU, so that's almost certainly going to improve significantly over the next month or two. So I'd like to think that the original video that I created, that the sentiment of it was correct, and that sentiment purely was, guys, wait and see. Don't pre-order CPUs, whether they're Intel or whether they're AMD. Let them earn your money. It's a significant investment and you want to make the right one. I'd really appreciate your thoughts and comments. I'll leave a link to the original video down in the description, guys. I'm open to constructive feedback, so I want to make the content that I produce on this channel as good as I possibly can. But I'd also like constructive feedback, not just blazing criticism and filth as it was in some cases. So there we go, guys. This is going to be the last floaty heady type video for a while. Do make sure that you're subscribed. There's going to be loads of great content coming up to give you a little bit of flavour about that. We're going to be taking a look at my audio recording gear. Significant upgrades coming up there. We're going to be upgrading the GPUs in my main build that's off screen. You can't see it just now. We're going to be doing a Ryzen video editing build and going to be doing something about a PC built in a wall. Now, I did talk about this way back in December. I've not forgotten, guys, so make sure you subscribe so you can catch all of that great content. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and I'll see you in my next video.